Hello, everyone. Demetrius Josh here. With me, I've got in the car
Josh Burville.
Yeah. So this is we're here with the Cue It Up Network. We are recording. This is a new thing for us. So if you hear a little background noise, it's because Josh and I we're road players. we're on the road. So we're coming back from the U.S. Open, and we thought we actually drove. And so we have a very long drive. So we thought this would be a good time while it's fresh and hot to kind of talk about our experience at the U.S. Open a little bit and go from there.
Yep. I'm glad we didn't do this after I busted out. I've had a few days to settle down over it, so this is the perfect timing.
Like that one when we were watching. Now I'm getting all out of order. I wasn't even going to bring this up, but one of my favorite moments was when we were watching. Dennis Grave was playing. Who do you remember? Who was Dennis Grave playing that eliminated him when he just made the final 16?
Chua.
Okay, I thought that was him. So he was up 10-8, and Dennis Grave misses a run out, like he blows a run out, and couldn't complete the rack. And then Chua runs out to go 10-9, runs out to get to the hill, and then at 10-10, Chua runs the table up to the 7 ball, and it looks like Dennis's miss at 10-8 is going to cost him the tournament. And then Chua runs up to the 7 ball, gets himself hopelessly out of line, and dogs the 7. And the 9's on the rail, so there's no way to get beyond the 9. And the 7 ball bounced all over the table. The cue ball was in the middle of the table, and the 7 ball rolled up and stopped behind the 8, where he had to kick. And then Dennis is just like, here he is on the hill. Dennis Graves on the hill, and he's got a kick at the 7 ball now, and he kicks and hits it, and looks like he's going to leave a real tough shot, but the cue ball trickles into the corner and scratches, and Chua taps him in. So Dennis missed 10-8, and then when his opponent missed back on the hill, he gets hooked beyond the low 8 ball. So why did I bring that up? Because right as we're watching, Jason Shaw came up and watching alongside of us, and he was giddy, man. He's like, Jason gets as giddy as I do, and he's sitting there watching, and he's like, "Oh, did you see that? That's the only ball he could get behind." And he's just giddy, and finally, and I feel kind of bad. Like I'm not dogging Dennis Grave at all. By the way, Dennis, if you ever hear this, like, great tournament, you're a hell of a player. But after Dennis Grave lost, he sat down in a chair in the corner of the arena. He pulled his jacket over his head, and Jason's like, "Yeah, it'll be a few months before he gets that one off, before he walks that one off." So anyway, that was just a little flashback to that's how it feels when you go out of the tournament, right?
God, that was brutal. I mean, that was just sick to watch, and all I felt was for Dennis, man. Like how devastating that was. Like he's from another country, right? He flew all the way over here to play, and it just shows how difficult the game is, man, and how heartbreaking it can be. And
well, good job. So Dennis hears this. Good job, man. Final 16, and I'll tell you what, he's playing really, really good pool. So I'm actually looking forward to seeing. A couple of years ago I didn't know who he was, and so now I'm trying to like backpedal and say good things about him. Like, the fact is that he's really coming out of the scene, and he's it's going to be fun to watch over the next couple of years.
Yeah, he's an incredible player.
I know stuff like that is like, that's just a pit stop along the way to what he's about to do. So anyway, okay.
I think I was one match away from him doing that to me.
Oh yeah.
I think if I would have won my second round, I think I would have played Dennis in the third round.
That's cool.
So yeah.
Okay, so quick lineup today. We are going to be talking about a little bit of a recap, not just on how we did out there at the Open, but also just some funny stories that happened along the way. And then we also have a topic of conversation that has to do with kind of a trap that people can fall into that impacts their continued growth. I'm calling it side quests, diversions that people get kind of misrouted onto, and we're gonna have some fun with that. So, but first, I've always got to plug my boot camp, and I think this one's gonna be fairly short. I just want to tickle it. I'm at Minnesota Pool Boot Camp, mnpoolbootcamp.com. I do 3-day training sessions. So for anybody, you don't have to be around my area because flights are cheap. You fly in, and I pick you up at the airport, bring you to my house, and we spend 3 days devoted to breaking down your game and putting together a plan that's going to get you where you want to go, and then executing on that so that you leave. We don't just plan it, we start training, and we keep training, and we train and train. You're a better player by the time you leave, and you have a clear path of where you want to go. But the one thing I want to say about that, too, I was talking to actually a guy called me today, and it looks like we're going to be doing a boot camp soon. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to that. But it was interesting because we were talking about putting together a game plan, and that everyone has a budget of time and energy. And so the thought I wanted to share with everyone today about that was, there's things that could work, and there's things that will work. And I guess it's one of those things I was thinking about with them. I'm like, when you have a plan where it's like, well, my plan is to go play sometimes when I feel like it, and then try real hard when I play. And if I do that for a while, hopefully I just win something. It's like, well, that plan could work. But I guess what was on my mind was like, there's things you can do that just will work. Like, well, if I get the right information and the right direction, and I work on the right things, enter the right number of competitions, spar with the right number of people for the right number of hours, then, like, I want to plan for somebody where it's like, if I do these things, there is no possible other outcome except for me getting where I want to go. And that's, to me, is a good game plan. Like, it's one of those things where, I want to take the mystery and the mysticism out of pool where it's like, oh, there's these winners and there's losers and there's people that somehow have it, and I don't know if I'm one of the people that has it or not. So I'm like, no, I want a game plan where it's like, yeah, if I do that, of course that's going to go. I'm going to get that. And then what I said to him is, I said, when you have a good game plan like that, the only disappointing thing is it takes some of the surprise out of, like, when you get to your goals. By the time you do everything that you need to do, it's like, well, yeah, of course I got there. It's not even like a surprise anymore because it's not some slot machine. I'm thinking Atlantic City, but anyway, it's kind of like, well, obviously, if I rub these two sticks together long enough, there's going to be a fire, and it just kind of takes all the mystery out of it. But, well, you may not have that same sense of surprise. You will feel the same sense of satisfaction. So that was my throwaway line, was you may not be surprised when you hit your goals if you have a good game plan, but it's just as satisfying. In fact, more satisfying because you actually get there. So anyway, that's what I do. 3-day pool boot camp. Anything you wanted to say about that, or what are your thoughts on that, Josh?
No, I mean, you nailed it. I was in the car when you were running the call, so I heard it, and it's awesome. And I was giving you knuckles, and yeah, I mean, it's really, really good approach that you have, and ideas about how to improve and how to set your sights, and that becomes more of a process-based kind of mindset, which is awesome. And the only thing I was thinking though, Dom, was shout out to Terry. You speaking of boot camp and your students, like he flew out from Canada. Terry, can you say his last name or no? Is it? Well, Terry knows who he is.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Terry, your student came out and sweated some matches, and we were able to watch some matches with him, and we went. I played some snooker with him and at the local club there, and it was fun. So hey, Terry, thanks for hanging out. It's awesome seeing you.
Yeah, really good to see you, Terry.
Yep.
So cool. So then so what we're not going to do, everybody, and I'm sorry, but I'm sure that Nate and we'll be doing his podcast, and I might even be a part of it, where it's more focused on like the U.S. Open overall, like how Matchroom did, and what the event was like for the players, and then
decisions on rules. And
breaking down like the victors and how they play. But what we're doing is a little different. We just wanted to kind of like, I've been getting some questions from people about how I did and how things went for me and Josh, and so I just thought we'd tell our story of kind of like this is not Matchroom review, and this is not Carlo Beato breakdown. This is just like how Josh and I did at the U.S. Open, and what went well, what didn't go well, and some of the funny things that happened, and some of the things we're going to take away that we are going to use as feedback to try to get where we're going. And then we're going to have our conversation topic about side quests. So that's what's... I don't know.
Sounds good when you whisper it.
Okay, I'll make sure I keep doing that. So, the U.S. Open. So Josh and I drove out. We left, and I don't know that anything really interesting happened on the drive. I think we're just going to bypass the... See, you guys get to fast forward. We didn't. We had to
live it. We had to live it for 3 days or 2 or 3 days. Yeah.
The tolls. All I can tell you is we paid our share of. If you guys find yourself on a turnpike on the East Coast that's particularly well paved, you're welcome. Okay.
And we did stop and play along the way. Just as a heads up, we stopped in Beloit. We played a little bit there. Like you and I kind of trained together and practiced. We stopped at a private club in Cleveland, I think.
Yep.
And that was kind of cool. And then we stopped in Philly, we played at Fusco's room.
Yeah, we went to Fusco's room.
Yeah, and then that's the only action we got. I got some 9-ball action with a local guy, and you got some 1-pocket action.
Yeah.
That was good. And then by the night after that, we were in Atlantic City. So that's your fast forward.
There
of
you
our
go.
Trip. Yep.
Now we're in Atlantic City.
Yep.
And yeah, so then, which way do we want to go from here?
Let's do the funny stories first.
The funny stories, okay. So, go ahead, Josh. Why don't you kick us off?
Okay, so I got a little list here so we can kind of follow some notes and not get too rabbit holder sidetracked. There's a few of them that we got. It's funny. So, and none of them are like overly hilarious, but they're pretty funny. So the elevator was funny. So we're on floor 11, okay? And the elevators were great because I've been to places before where the elevators are very slow and it takes forever. This place had like very fast elevators, tons of elevators, all great. The trick with the elevators are they're dangerous. So normally in an elevator you could put your arm in or your foot in or something to stop like it has that little bracket that if you bang that bracket the thing will be like, whoa, I don't want to crush anybody, so I got to open back up. The elevator's kind of smart that way for hundreds of, well, not hundreds of years, but like many years since the advent of elevators. That little thing in the middle, you'd always been able to put your arm in there. You know, I've been in hundreds of elevators, and you always put your arm in there. Well, Demi put so tell them what you did.
Yeah. So the first time we needed to get to our floor, there was an elevator with its door shutting, and I'm like, oh, excuse me, and I just jutted my arm in there as if it was going to bounce back. And the elevators, I don't want to make any exaggerations. They don't actually like close on your arm to where you're going to be hospitalized or anything, but they do not bounce back. Like basically what happens is it just closes on your arm. It closes on your arm, man, and then you just have to wiggle your arm out of there. It's like a
bear in a honey jar.
Yeah, exactly. Like you just got snapped in some kind of a trap.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So they got me, and I told Josh about it, and Josh is like, well, you know, it's just so hard to believe, right? So what did you do?
Well, I go, it can't be that way. It's not safe, right? So I'm coming down like the day later, and the first thing that happened was I kind of raced into the elevator to catch up with some people, and the thing closed, and it slammed my shoulder like an NFL.
It winged you.
Yeah, it winged me like an NFL D-back or something. And I'm like, oh shit, man, you gotta be careful on these things. So then, you know, next time I come on the elevator, I'm all by myself. There's no one around, and I got a bottle of water in my hand, and the people get off the elevator, and I'm trying to be cautious and courteous, so I'm standing back. Well, these things also close very fast. So it's the worst of both worlds, where they close super fast, and then they clamp down like an alligator. So I'm like, okay, and I just still didn't believe Demi. Like, not that I didn't believe him, but I kind of didn't. So I'm like, I have to test this, because I have an opportunity, and it just happened in the moment. I have my water bottle. I stick my water bottle in like it's a hand or a foot or something, and the elevator clamped down on it. It would not let go. So I literally was laughing, and I was holding the water bottle, and the elevator doors were clamped, and it wouldn't close. It wouldn't do anything. It just clamped, and it was stuck. So I literally had to grab both hands on the water bottle and like almost put my foot up against the door and like pop the water bottle out. And then I knew. Then I believed Debbie. That was my proof. I finally saw it for myself.
Yeah. So it's just funny, you know, when you go to a tournament, it's like there's always things that you prepare for, but some of the traps, you know, you always gotta have eyes in the back of your head, Josh.
Yeah,
that's it when you're a road player. So
yeah. And then this is, you know, public service announcement. If you're at Harrah's at the Atlantic City, careful in the elevators.
That's right.
So
just wait for the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not worth it. Okay.
All right. So next up on the list, the trap table.
Oh gosh, I forgot. Okay, yeah. So during our stay out there, after I was eliminated, we went up to the we went up to the Atlantic City Billiard Club,
mm-hmm.
and there was a well-known player in there that I decided I wanted to just play a set of pool with, and so I don't know. I walked up and asked him to play, and we played a race. We played a set of pool, and it would have been maybe more than one set. But as soon as I started playing, I was like, wow, this guy's playing bad. This guy, I can't believe how bad he plays. I thought he played better than that because, you know, he's, you know, a known player, whatever, to some extent. And, but he was missing, and I was like, this is going to be easy. And I started and so I stayed a game or two right away. And then nothing went in the pocket. And, you know, the long story short is I found out, like, pretty quickly, like, within a rack or two, that this was the tightest table I've ever played on in my life. Like, I've played on plenty. Like, we have a table in Minneapolis that's like really, 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 really trappy, like 4-inch pockets with deep shelves, and like, you know, like at least 4-inch pockets with tight shelves, and it's very, very, very challenging. This table at the biggest was 3 7/8 inch, and beyond that, the rails were a little gaffy, the cut of the pocket was gaffy, and the cue ball and the ball set. I mean, it was like, I haven't ever played Chinese 8-ball, but I would assume it's kind of like that. And I didn't know that when I asked this guy to play. So here I am playing this player and playing, we're not playing for fun, right? And I didn't, and all of a sudden I can't, like, nobody could run out. Like, nobody could run out. In fact, to give you an example of how difficult this was, he and I both missed 2 9-balls that would be concedable. Like, literally, you saw me, Josh. I missed. You saw one of them I missed. Well, that was the hard one. The other one was substantially easier than that. And the other guy, he missed 2 9-balls that were absolutely concedable. And but they just, you'd shoot them all on this table because none of them have to go. And so it was this absurd situation where nobody could run out, and then all the rules, like all the strategies change. So at one point, my guy's on the hill. He's up like 6-5. We're going to 7. And at 4-4, by the way, I just asked him if he wanted to call the thing off. I'm like, man, I didn't know what I was getting into. I'm like, this is stupid. Like we could just quit and call this set off. Like, and I told him, I said, you know what? I'm not playing a second set. Like, even if you beat me, I'm quitting because I don't want to play on this. So, like, I don't want you to think I'm firing my toothpick at your lumberyard here. But like, this isn't what I signed up for. I'm not having any fun. Like, this isn't pool. And he's like, of course he thinks he's stealing from me. So he's like, nah, we're gonna play it out. So anyway, he's up 6-5, and the 2-9 combo was like almost dead, and he played a safety on the 1, and I looked at the 2-9 and I looked at the 1 ball, and I can kick and hit the 1 100% of the time, like absolutely an easy kick, but I didn't know for sure I could get safe. And the last thing I wanted to do was leave him a shot where he could make the 1 and the 2-9, because there's zero chance he could run the table on this table. So I looked at it and I'm just like, nah, and I just took an intentional foul and shoved the 2 to the middle of the end rail, and gave up ball in hand. And he was able to make the 1 and get on the 2 and pocket the 2, and that's where his run stopped. So it's like, he can't even get to the 3 ball. And it's like, anyway, it was just, that's the kind of table we were on. It's like, all the rules changed, and yeah, so then it ends up going like, he ends up beating me, so good for him. He got me. I think he got me. We decided, I got it to Hill. He said, let's win by 2. So he ended up he won the next 2 games. He beat me 8-6, and he won the next game, and then I charged the 9-ball nail. I just couldn't, it's just brutal, man.
You came with an 8-ball shot that was
the best shot of my life.
Almost impossible, and I saw you cueing it high, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna ping pong out like a pocket tightener, and you nutted it and got really...
Yeah, he's up 7-6. I forgot about that. He's up 7-6. The 9's in the rack area. The cue ball's by the 9, and the 8-ball's up table, and I had to like fire it down the rail with high ball and force follow to the side rail, end rail, and back to the other end of the table. And I was actually bridged to where I was bridging off the end rail, and I warped that ball in, and that's about as hard as I ever hit a shot. And I somehow split the wicket on that thing, and then I dogged the 9 like a sucker. It's okay. But it was like, it's hard to feel bad. He dogged 2 9-balls, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That table, I remember when you guys were warming up and I saw the table, I'm like, oh no. Because I saw the shots that he was missing, and I'm like, this is not something, like, these pockets are like under 4 inches, and then and it just played out that way. And we were talking about it, and Demi, you were saying, like, we were trying to figure out what's a beatable ghost on that table. I mean, just to give you an idea of how tight it was. I mean, that thing was... I
would rather play the 10-ball ghost on a normal diamond than the 5-ball ghost on that table.
Yeah.
I think I could beat the 4-ball ghost on that table, but it's like, I was thinking about like how often a ball would land. Yeah.
And he had made a comment that he didn't think Dennis could beat the 9-ball ghost on it and things like that. So
yeah. So
yeah, it was a trappy.
You never know. You never know what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
It's like
funny.
And then my personal favorite moment was, of course, things that I can really talk about on a podcast. We can't share everything, but I liked sweating the last few matches. That was a lot of fun. And one thing that I didn't really know that I was doing until it just kind of happened organically. Like, I didn't plan it. But when we were watching these matches, there was a few times when, like, it would be a really, really big rack or a really, really big shot, and, like, somebody would miss a ball or just do a devastating mistake and maybe miss a 9-ball or just, hook themselves on the 6 or something like that. And I just decided it would be fun to be the guy in the crowd that gasped really, really loud. And so, like, not every mistake, but once in a while, like, if somebody, like, came off a ball and scratched, I would just go, like, really, really loud. And I don't know, it was just kind of, maybe you had to be there, but I was just sitting, like, I was the guy that went, and took the deep, extended, super loud 100 decibel gasp. So I was having fun with that. So if you guys were watching a stream and you heard a very audible gasp, that was probably me. And I was just having fun with it, man. It was like, it's just, I loved it. I was hanging on the drama, and I just love, I'm like, somebody's got to gasp.
Well, and the funny thing is that there was like music thumping the whole entire tournament until the semifinals. And then they turned off the music and everything got dead quiet. And so it was pretty, like, your gasp went to 11, and it was just really, it was an unnaturally loud gasp.
Like the players, if they heard it, they're like, who gasps that loud?
It was pretty brutal.
I wasn't that bad. I wasn't.
No, I know.
I was a little bit on the loud side, but still within tolerance of, like, what a kind of a, an eccentric pool sweater might do. So
exactly.
So those are some of the things that happen when you're playing pool. But all right, so fun times. But what about so people have asked how we did, and so Josh, how did your tournament go?
Well, let's see. It was all right. I learned a lot, so we can talk about that too. I went 1-2, so it's like I played. Who's that guy? Shane Wolford. Shane Wolford first round, and he's a good tough player. And I got there. I was down 6-3, and I got it 9-7. And I would say that I played tight with a little bit loose in the first round, and it worked out okay for me. Second round, I played a Eurobot. I literally can't remember the guy's name. 780 something Fargo-ish, and it was pretty awful. I played way too loose. I ended up losing 9-4, and it was pretty bad. I was pretty upset. Just how loose I was. So then I pulled myself together and made a determination that I was gonna go out on my shield and fight hard and not be so loose and try to. That was what I came up with as my plan moving forward after that second round loss, and then I played a tough player. He's around a 700, and he's from New Jersey, Joey Tessa, I think his name is, and I executed my game plan. I played super, super hard, super focused, and got to 8-6, and lost 9-8, and it was brutal, and it was tough. And then I went through my my post tournament ritual of quitting pool, and then I determined that's not gonna work for me. So I scraped myself off the floor, and and then just kind of thought about what I want to do and how I want to do things. And I got the International Open coming up in a month, and after I lose out of the tournament, I'm thinking about punting everything and just negative and it's yucky and sad. But I got back together. I pulled it together. So everything's good.
The periods of quitting pool after a loss have gotten substantially shorter and shorter and shorter as you've competed more, to where it's like now you quit pool for about 5 minutes at most. Oftentimes you quit pool for like 20 seconds. But it's like there's not an actual gap of like years or months. It's like it's worked its way down to where now you quit pool for like 3 minutes and you're okay.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's good.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of being silly about it and just being transparent and honest about how I am, man. I got my problems and I got my issues, but I'm also trying and I'm not quitting, and I can get negative and I can get sad and I can get disappointed, but I can also pick myself up and try again. So
not quitting might be like kind of the most important skill in pool improvement. So it's not a bad thing to kind of talk about. It's like, really, there's a lot of things where if you just don't stop, and what is like the Dory in the Finding Nemo, it just keeps swimming or whatever. I mean, if you ever want to find Nemo, you have to keep swimming.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Yeah. it's an interesting process, man.
Well, one thing I was going to ask you. So one thing that was kind of new to Josh and I was, a lot of tournaments have 30-second shot clocks, but usually those shot clocks are reserved for late in the tournament or the TV table. And Josh and I have not made it to the final 8 or final 16 or whatever of a major international event to where they put us on that TV table. And so we all this tournament, everybody was on a 30-second shot clock from the first match on all matches. So they had scorekeepers on every table keeping a 30-second shot clock on everybody with one extension per rack. And that was the first time either of us have played on a shot clock. And what's interesting is that I'm typically on the slower side and Josh is on the faster side. But and when we practiced in Beloit, when we were warming up, we practiced with the shot clock, and it seemed like it wasn't really an issue for either of us. But that seemed like it might have changed a little bit once the match started. How did that go? Did that make an impact on you?
Oh yeah, it was awful. I mean, it was awful. I just wasn't ready for it, and it specifically hit me in a really awful way, and I need to set and reset, and I have a lot of negative thoughts going, and I need to reset, and if I can't reset those thoughts, then I'm kind of screwed. And and there's probably other people that would say, well, it affected me too, and all that stuff. So that's totally fine. It's just my experience was it was awful. I mean, it just was really, really tough to fade, and it just didn't fit with me well. And now that I've done it once, I probably could readjust and hulk out and practice with it more and try to think my way through it and build a new rhythm and all that. But under those conditions and the way it was going and how things worked out and everything, it just didn't work for me. It was better in the third set, but in the first set it was a challenge. In the second set it was a disaster, and in the third set I was a little bit more used to it. And my opinion is I liked the way I played the third set, and I was okay with the shot clock, even if I was a little rushed at times. But it definitely is. You don't get a lot of shells out there, and it just kind of it was a big one. And I literally forgot about that when I was just giving my recap, but I'm not trying to make excuses either. It's like, hey man, it's tough on everybody. Everyone has to shoot the shot clock. I get it. It's just, for me in particular, it was awful. So yeah,
and I think I can maybe come back to that after I tell my little Sega, because there's a couple things I wanted to dig in on that. But my tournament, it's weird. I feel good in terms of how I executed my game plan. Results, I will tell you, I could have made a deep run the way I was playing, and I could have gone 2-0 the way I was playing. So the results are just kind of I look at the way the sets played out, and I'm like, there's a few things that didn't have to go that way, good and bad. I didn't have to win the matches I won, and I didn't have to lose one of the matches I lost. But it's just cool, man. It's sometimes somebody wins, somebody loses. So I got to play Jeremy Jones first round, and that was pretty cool. I was excited to get to play him because, he and I have a lot in common. We both, anyway. So we started playing, and it's race to 9. And Jeremy has not been competing a ton. He's been doing a lot of lessons and commentary, and I know he's, But anyway, and we're both on the shot clock, and we're both first round. And first round is really, really hard for everybody. So for those that haven't gone to a pro event, there's a lot of patchy sets in the first round. That's it. There's just a lot of patchy sets. We haven't settled in. We haven't gotten any momentum or rhythm. And I really, really, really struggled with the shot clock. And that was a huge issue for me. And we'll get into why. It's not about how much time you have to shoot. It's more about other things, which we can get into. But so I struggled with the shot clock. And it's there's a bunch of things, man. You've got the shot clock is one thing. You've got the pressure is another thing. And then the third thing is how difficult the game is to play, and just having to run through those tables and make a couple of shots and get adjusting to the new slidey equipment and kind of getting a feel for the table. And then last of all is your opponent, which they get to play back, and they're very, very tough to beat. So it's you're up against the clock, the pressure, the game, and your opponent, and it was a lot. And I was down 6-3, and then fortunately for me, I mean, I'm not real happy that Jeremy lost or, made a couple mistakes, but he kind of gave me the opportunities I needed to get it tied up at 7. And then, one thing that kind of funny happened at the end is I got up 8-7, going to 9. And then I ended up having, I played a safety and he kicked and hit a ball and he left me a 6-ball run. So I've got a 6-ball run where I'm up 8-7 to close out the set. And there was a weird thing that came up with the scorekeeper. And long story short, they had to switch scorekeepers on us. So the person that was kind of like almost reffing our match had to get swapped out. And so here I am, I'm up 8-7. I've got a 6-ball run for the win. I've got an easy shot on the first shot. And they said, hold on, we got to switch scorekeepers. And I had like I don't know if it was 5 or 10 minutes, but it was a substantial like pause in the action where I kind of sat in my chair for like 8 or 9 minutes waiting to be told I could go ahead and run these 6 balls. And the longer I sat there, I'm just staring at this run, like trying to be like, it was just like the ultimate ice job. I mean, the run just got harder and harder, and all I'm seeing is like more and more ways that can I run these balls out, and I need to run these balls out, and I mean, I can run those balls out, I think, and it was a weird spot, man. I've just never, it's just one of those things, like, it's like when you're a pool player, you just find yourself in interesting spots that you never really expect to be in, and I've just, I've played a lot of matches, and I've never been like iced on the hill where I've had to wait 10 minutes staring at a 6-ball run, and then somebody comes back and start the clock. It's like, okay. That was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But anyway, I got away with it. I actually got a little lucky that run. I misplayed my cue ball. It doesn't matter. I got through it. So that was cool. And then the second round, I played Waleed. I don't remember his last name, but from Qatar. And he's a good player. I mean, we're similar rating. He might have me by a few Fargo points. But that one, I felt good about the way I closed it out. It was 7-7. He came up dry on the break, and I ran out 2 racks. So that felt good. But it always feels good to close out on the hill. And then I lost my next 2 sets. My third round was Ralph Souquet, who has, always been one of my favorite players. And he performed phenomenally. He didn't run on as many racks for the break as I maybe expected him to. He was either coming up dry or getting hooked or having to play a safety. Like he wasn't raining packages on me. But what was interesting is him and my next opponent in the next 2 sets, with Ralph and my next opponent, who was Conrad, between both opponents I played, only 1 ball was missed by my opponents in 2 sets into 11. At this point, we're racing to 11. And they both played like phenomenal sets. And Ralph played a phenomenal set. And the only thing he did wrong was like, there was a couple safeties that leaked out. And that was kind of what kept me alive. And so he had me like 8-4, and then I got it to like 8-6. Then he got me to 10-6, and I got it to 10-8, and then I choked. And I just choked, and I missed a shot, and closed me out 11-8. And now I get to spend the rest of my life wondering if I'd won that rack to get to 9-10, if I could have maybe come with something that stole that set from Ralph and made a good run in the U.S. Open. But instead, I'm on the B side playing a much softer opponent in Conrad from Poland, and I can't pronounce his name, Conrad J.
And by softer, you mean not softer.
And by I mean much. It's like I was sitting there, I'm like, well, Ralph literally only missed 1 ball against me. I was up 10-8, and he finally missed a tough 1 ball. And I'm like, the guy played a really, really good set on me, and I'm like, well, it can't get any tougher than that. And then I played Conrad, and it might not have literally been 3 innings, but it was almost a 3-inning set. The guy beat me 11-1, where he got me down like 4-0 in like 1 or 2 turns. He ran a bunch of racks on me to get me down 4-0. And I got a shot. He scratched on the break, and I ran the table to get the 4-1. And then I broke, and I played a safety. I played a safety on him. So now I ran a rack, and now I've got him hooked on the 1 ball. I'm like, I'm going to fight my way back. And he pulls out his jump cue and jumps that ball in. And I don't remember if he ran 5 or 6 racks, but it was something like that. Like, it was like 4-1, and he's hooked, and then it was like 10-1. And he basically ran like 5 or 6 racks on me. And yeah, that was it. It was almost, the set was almost over. And then finally at 10-1, he finally hooked himself and jumped and missed and didn't leave me a shot. I tried to cross bank a ball 2-way and it ended up hanging up, and he ran out. So I got beat 11-1 in like 3 or 4 innings, where yeah, it was just very, very fast. And the funny part about his runs is like each one got tougher and tougher and tougher.
Yeah.
And it was, Josh, have you ever seen anything like that?
No, it was incredible. I mean, the shots that he made was very, very eye-opening. He shot difficult shots very hard with multiple rail shape, like hangers, and he was dead dialed in the zone like that. There's no two ways around it. And you just, it's not like, oh, go ahead and shoot those shots all day and we'll bet on it. Not at all. I mean, the guy literally is a great player, and he just shoots very dynamic shots in hard and smooth. I mean, that was really, really impressive, like super impressive. And the runouts got tougher and tougher and tougher, and he kept doing it and jumping in balls and running out and back cutting 3-rail shape from distance.
And how many balls he like had a run where he like had to like splice like 3 different shots past the side pocket up the rail, and he just kept like, it was almost like he had balls on the side rail where he had to play the 4 ball past the side up in the corner and like smooth his cue ball around to shoot another ball past the side up in the corner, and then thin cutting balls and just up the rail, and it was just
everything. Yeah,
it was like a video game, and he was like, it was funny to watch. He was just running around the table with a smile on his face, laughing as he shot everything in the hole.
Yeah.
And it's tough action. So what I learned is that it's never fun to lose, because if you lose a close set, then you wonder, like, you feel like, man, I almost had that. But when you lose a blowout set, then it's like, I got blown out. And so there's really, and if you lose when you play bad, then you're like, oh man, I played bad, I gave that one away. And if you lose when you play good, then you're like, my good game isn't enough. And so it's like, there's really no way to lose out of the tournament and not kind of feel like, you know, like your pet died or something. It's not the funnest, but no. So overall, though, what I'm happy with is that I felt like I definitely choked a few times, and I definitely had patches where the pressure would get to me, and I'd kind of yip a shot, or you know, I had a couple blown shots due to pressure. But overall, I felt pretty composed, and it got better as the tournament went on, and I closed out my first 2 matches, and I responded pretty well to the adversity I faced. So I felt like I handled the pressure pretty well. I felt like I played pretty well, and then I managed to, I ran a few tables from the break that when I needed to, and so I knew going out there the break was a big thing, and I was pretty hung up on generating opportunities. I generated pretty good opportunities off my break. Some of the things I've been practicing came up, and I was able to do them, so I felt good about everything. I just that same performance, like Jeremy Jones could have just closed me out in the first set, or that guy that Waleed, he could have run the last 2 racks instead of dry breaking. So it's like, I feel like I could have made it further. I could have came shorter. Results are very, very, very turbulent, but as it is, I felt pretty good. And then I wanted to talk about that time clock, because that was definitely, I got better with the time clock every set. But I think the thing I learned about the time clock is that it's not about the time. It's not the time. It's the pressure and the emotion of the situation. And so people could say, oh, well, 30 seconds is plenty of time to shoot a shot. What's the problem? But the problem is when it creates like a sense of panic, because when you're playing pool under pressure, it's already hard to stay calm and relaxed. And when you have a clock that's ticking and people calling 10 seconds, and you know that you're coming short on time sometimes, and you have to get the shot off, it just, that you can't, like, if you want to stand up and like regroup. I remember playing Jeremy, I missed a couple shots. I remember 2 shots I missed where normally I would have reset on the ball, but I just felt like I couldn't get off the shot. And what do you think? I mean, so my thing is that I don't think it's about the time. I think it's about trying to keep an emotional calm inside of that time pressure.
Yep. And the thing I learned by watching the time clock and watching players on the clock after I got knocked out, which is a little late, but whatever, is that there's a way to handle the clock and the way to handle your timeout, or your extension rather. And I guess I didn't really know until after I'd watched. It's like I was always worried about burning my extension. And the thing that I saw is that as soon as there was something where a person was going to be up against it and they weren't ready, they just take their extension, because it was you're only going to get this one opportunity at this rack, or maybe several racks if you're unlucky with how it turns out. So you have to, like, you got to use your extension when you have it, and you got to reset. And I didn't really know that. I mean, I rushed myself on critical shots at critical points in matches, and then when you do that and you miss, and it's like a shot that I feel like under normal circumstances I could reset and come with, then it's like I'm kind of like flustered more, and everything feels even more rushed and more screwed up. So some of it's just understanding that the way I saw all everyone else that had been on the clock before, they just took their extension. No one was really saving their extensions. They just took it if they needed it.
So here's and I learned this along the way is that if I had, because here's where the fear comes in. You're afraid that if you take your extension, then at some point later in the rack, you're going to be the spot where you have a tough 9-ball and you're not going to have time to take a deep breath and really get off the shot and make sure you make it. So there's this fear that you're going to have a tricky spot come up, you're not going to have your extension and you're going to choke on the 9-ball, or that you're going to hook yourself on the 8 or something or leave yourself a tough 9-ball and miss it. And so it's like, because of that fear, there's like a natural real reluctance to take your extension. And the problem with that is that if you don't take your extension, you blow it now, and then you don't even. Future. There is no future. And so what I learned is that like if I had to count how many games did I lose because I made an error because I was rushed and I did not have my extension anymore, versus how many errors did I make because I rushed to not use my extension, it's like I probably made, out of all my errors, there might have been 10 that I rushed myself, and only like 1 where I was rushed by my lack of extension. Now, of course, if I'd taken my extension all of those times, then maybe there would have been situations where later in the rack I would have been rushed, and maybe I would have made 3 errors because I was rushed at the end of the rack. But it's better to make 3 errors where I'm rushed at the end of the rack than 10 errors where I'm like, over the tournament where I'm like rushing myself unnecessarily.
Yeah.
And so in the future, if I play a time clock, here's the point is, if you have to ask yourself, should I use my extension? The answer is yes. If anybody plays with the time clock, if the thought crosses your mind that should I use it, it's probably a yes. Because if you're fine, you wouldn't even ask yourself that question.
The way I saw it was, when you get a warning, you take your extension. Unless you're down on the ball and you're absolutely dialed in, then you make an exception because you're ready to shoot and trigger. But like, if anybody, I watch players and they just naturally called their extension when the time clock went out.
Yeah, the only exception would be if you have a stop shot and you're using your time now to like look at the pattern so that you kind of use burning your clock now, and then they call 10 seconds, you get down and shoot a stop shot. That's one thing. Or if you're down in a shot
and you're ready to trigger, and it's a pretty routine shot,
and you're waiting for them to call. So sometimes, here's the funny part too, is sometimes you're waiting. What I learned is a lot of times you get down on the shot and then you wait for them to call 10 seconds so that you shoot, because you don't want them to be calling. Not only don't you want them to call 10 seconds like while you're about to shoot, but you don't want to wonder when they're about to call 10 seconds. Like, you just want to hear it so that you know that's not going to come up, and then you go ahead and deliver your stroke.
Yep.
The problem is, and this, I don't really want to get into this, but there was a couple times the scorekeepers might not have called 10. They were instructed from the match room not to call 10 seconds if a player was about to shoot the shot. So what that means is, like, when they're taking their backstroke to deliver their cue, don't call 10 seconds at that moment. That's what they were instructed. Well, the problem is not all the scorekeepers are real deep with pool experience or ref experience. They weren't referees. They were like volunteer scorekeepers. So some of the refs or some of the scorekeepers didn't know when you were down. If you were down taking practice strokes, they're supposed to call 10 seconds if you're taking practice strokes. But if they don't know how to differentiate practice strokes from a final stroke, then they might just not call 10 seconds at all. So there was a few times when I was down getting ready to shoot, waiting for them to call 10 seconds so I could take my shot, and then they never called 10 seconds, and then I'm like, man, am I timing out? I don't even. Anyway, it was funny. It was some challenging stuff, especially we've never been on the clock. And but as far as what Josh said about rhythm, what I found worked for me was, I've been calling it, like, I was kind of calling it a waltz, which is kind of 3 things that I kind of do on these shots, where it's like, first I have to make my decision as to what I'm going to do. Then I have to get down on the shot and get set up to where I feel like I'm ready to pull the trigger. And that's kind of when I go into my pause at the cue ball. And then I have to deliver a calm swing. And what I think I did is I kind of broke it down that way, where it was like, make up my mind, lock in my shot, deliver my cue. And it was like the 3 parts of a waltz. And so what I realized was, as long as I made up my mind very quickly, like, I just had to make up my mind very quickly. And as long as I made up my mind quickly, it didn't take me that long to get on the ball and lock in and then deliver my cue. So I think where I was struggling early on was, I'm used to having more time to weigh out. I'm used to weighing out options. And once I basically just said, no, I'm not going to weigh out options, of course that happens a little bit, right? Like maybe you look at two things, but when you weigh out your options, you have to go like gut reaction. Like, am I going to do this or that? We're going with that. That feels good. And you just have to like kind of pick pretty quick. And I'd say as long as you're like making your decision within like 2 to 5 seconds, then you have time to get on the shot, get down, set, and pull the trigger. It's that if you have a decision where it's not so easy, then you just can't really weigh options, I'd say, very often. So anyway, once I found that rhythm for me, then I started playing much more calm with the shot clock. And then not only did it eliminate the threat of the shot clock, but it eliminated me feeling rushed or rushing balls as much. So, of course I didn't feel rushed at all against Conrad because I never shot. So, and then the funny thing with Conrad too, I forgot he was running like a million racks on me, and it was funny because I was just like, I looked at Josh at one point. He'd ran like I don't know how many racks at me, but he was up like 8-1, and I looked at Josh and I was like, I don't have a response for this. It was a pretty absurd set. And then, And then I liked it at 9-1. He was getting ready to break at 9-1, and I've only been to the table once, and I ran the table, and I'm down 9-1, and I looked at Josh and I said to him, "This is a big rack." It was just completely absurd. It's like the way it was. The set was so lopsided. Yeah. And then of course after I lost, when we were walking back, like it's always kind of quiet after a loss, and we're walking back to the hotel room and dodging the jaws of death at the elevator, and I looked at Josh and I think I said, at times like this, it's hard not to get somewhat philosophical, because it's just like you watch a set like that and you're just like, I'll never play a set like that in my life. So what am I doing? But we all have our moments. So
well, it's like after every loss, it's hard not to get philosophical, and it's difficult. It's a hard game, man. It's a hard journey, hard game, for sure.
That is true. So Josh, good tournament, good fun. What are your takeaways for the practice table and what you're going to work on between now and next tournament?
Yeah, that's good, Dem, because I do have one coming up, like I mentioned, in a month at the International Open. So I learned a couple things, right? So after I thought about what I can get from my diamond table and my cues, and how much what I can recoup back from my investment on all that time. So once I thought about pulling my listing from eBay, I thought, well, what did I learn? So here's the thing, like, so golfing, I grew up golfing and playing golf and working on handicap and kind of getting my handicap down and playing tournaments and seeing how I performed in tournaments versus practice and all that stuff. And I've kind of lost track of that because I haven't golfed. I'm 48 years old. I haven't golfed in many years since kids and things and family. I kind of gave up golf and just kind of took whatever time I had and kind of put it towards pool. So the one thing that kind of got me off tilt a little bit was I was thinking about Fargo rate as it would like be analogous to a golf handicap, and I thought about it and I thought, if I look at my Fargo rate performance for the tournament, I thought it was pretty close to like shooting my handicap scope, like like shooting my handicap. Like, so if in golf, I was like a 5, got down to about a 5 handicap, and so on a 70, it kind of depends on slope and things, but let's just say it's like mid to high 70s. So if I went to a tournament and I could shoot my golf handicap, I'd be really happy, because there's a ton of pressure, and I've seen like literally dozens, if not hundreds, of people not be able to shoot their handicap under pressure. And so I just thought about it as far as Fargo rate, and I looked at my tournament, the U.S. Open, which is tons of pressure, international stage, like world-class players, all those things. And when I calmed down about it, it just hit me, and I'm like, well, I pretty much shot my handicap, quote unquote, in this tournament under a lot of pressure, and it made me realize, man, I just like in golf, it'd be like playing a round of golf in a tournament and shooting my handicap in a big pressure situation. But the thing is it's like, yeah, I might have hit in the trap, I might have hit it in the water, I might have jacked one out of bounds. It's like I had a bunch of errors and mistakes, but when all the smoke cleared, I kind of shot my handicap, which is not bad in a big tournament like that. And so I don't know, that's kind of my first takeaway was, and I wanted to let other, like, kind of share that with people and say, hey, I don't think it's okay to be completely wrapped up in Fargo, or if you're a golfer to be wrapped up in your handicap and all that. But if you look at it in a quantitative, qualitative way, I think it can be useful. And I think that for me it was useful to kind of pull myself up off the ground and to realize, even though I made all these mistakes, even though I felt awful, even though it felt really punty and bad, it wasn't as bad as I thought. And when I actually kind of look at the numbers, it was kind of on par. So that and under a lot of pressure with the shot clock and all those things we already went over. So that was a way to look at it, and that kind of helped me kind of calm down, I guess I'd say. So I learned that little trick, and go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that what stood out for me is like how many of these sets. So when we talked a little bit about this, I mean, and I've talked before about process versus results, and it's like we live in a world that's very, very result focused. Very, very, very much. Did you win or lose? Who'd you beat? Did you cash? Any scalps? How deep was your run? Did you get there? Did you make? Are you the hero or are you the GOAT? Are you the guy that ran out on the hill or are you the guy that dogged it? Like, which one defines you and which one? But it's like, the funny part about that is like, it's just not the optimal way to think about it, because when you're playing, there's all, I mean, it's just a process. It's just not optimal to like be so result focused. And there's a balance, like you have to be results driven, but so often you can turn in a great performance and not get there, and you can turn in a poor performance and get there. And then, like I use my example with Jeremy Jones. Like Jeremy Jones had me down 6-3. I'm rushed on the shot clock, nervous first round pressure, and just patchy. And if he had closed me out, I would have lost my first round. And then I don't know what would have happened. Maybe I dog out in 2 rounds or 3 rounds. But the bottom line is that what happened was he made a few mistakes because he was patchy and a little first round and just whatever. And then because he made a few mistakes and it goes 7-7 and I end up running out a couple racks and I win. But the thing is, so now I get to look back and be like, oh, I won that set and look at me and I ran out of the hill, the 6 balls after being iced. But it's like, that didn't have to go that way. And so the funny part about it is, just because I got across the finish line that set didn't mean that I didn't make all the mistakes that I made during that set, that I didn't dog the shots I dogged, that I didn't, come up short where I came up short. On the other hand, when I lost to Ralph 11-8, just because I missed a 7 ball that would have got me to 10-9, doesn't mean that I didn't play a very, very good set and manage myself well and actually play pretty well the whole time. And so, like, when you it's, I guess the whole idea of process is you kind of grade yourself on, did I do my best in each of the areas that I feel are my areas of focus and the things I need to do, and then not even if they all, like, you certainly can't look at did I win and lose, and then you can't even really look at how well did I do sometimes, because in a situation like that, like we were facing stuff, we're facing a shot clock we've never faced. We're facing pressure that we don't get to face all that often. And it's, more often, it's every couple months more than every couple hours. It's just a tough spot. And so if you get up there and you do your best, then, I don't really know. It's like, I just don't really see any reason to be hard on yourself, even if you didn't shoot your Fargo rate. Like, I guess that would be my question, Josh. We didn't really talk about that. But, like, suppose you'd underperformed your Fargo rate, but you were trying your best in each area, and that was just how you played. I mean, I guess at what point, like, when do you ever look at it and say, well, now I should be upset with myself? Like, when is there a time you should be upset with yourself? Because I have an answer, but what's your answer to that?
That's a good one, man. Yeah, it's hard not to get upset with yourself because we're human beings, right? And so, am I a human being? Yes. Do I get upset with myself? Yes. Do I get disappointed and sad because I don't get what I want? Like, yeah, for sure. And I think my answer is, well, my process is to be upset and then to find a way out of that. Because if I sit there and say I'm going to go out and I'm going to have some plan where I don't get upset with myself if I lose or if I underperform or if I whatever, it's like, that's just not going to work for me. So my answer is, I'm always going to get upset. And so my answer is also, I'm not, like, okay. The thing that I'm not going to do is pound my cue, slam the table, slow concessions. Like, I'm not going to tisk, roll my eyes, and this is ridiculous and all that stuff. It's because I don't, that's like, so those are the areas where I think, well, I'm not going to get like that. But if I'm disappointed and I underperform and I make if I choke, or if I like in the second set, I just like kind of punted the opportunity, and it's upsetting, man. But I guess my process is to be upset and then find a way to sort of make sense of it and move forward.
Okay, so
that's my thing.
So specifically, like right now, what you use to kind of not talk yourself off a ledge, but what you use to kind of like, okay, so you lose, you're kind of disappointed and unhappy with your, unhappy and like not real feeling, you're feeling upset. What you used to talk yourself off the ledge this time was, if I looked at my overall performance and I'd grade myself as I performed the way, I would expect someone at my level to perform, and, I didn't underperform. That's how you kind of consoled yourself. So my question is, how would you talk yourself off the ledge if you had lost and you did underperform?
Then I would have to look at the reasons I underperformed, because I did underperform in my second set, and then I have to look at the reasons, and then I have to find corrective actions. And so that's the way I do it. If I look at it, I say, I underperformed in that situation. Can I do better the next time? And can I learn from that? And can I make the changes necessary to try to not ensure that never happens? Because I'm going to underperform from now until the time I'm done playing. But I want to learn from those bad performances. That's all. So I would just evaluate where I underperformed and add those corrections to my game plan.
Yeah, I think that's really good, because I think that there's a big difference between saying, I'm going to look at those mistakes and then I'm going to find a way to make sure they never happen again, because it's like, no, and I'm going to get to that with in a second, because it will happen again. But what you can do is say, at least what can I do to where sometimes those things don't happen again. So in other words, instead of saying I'm going to figure out what I did wrong and make sure that never happens again, it's like, well, how can I play my cards in the future to where sometimes it doesn't break down there? And I think that's a big difference, is that instead of looking at it to where, and I'll give you an example for me, is that I had, it was very funny, Josh, because I missed a 7-ball on Ralph at 10-8. And it's like, I'll always wonder, man, 10-9, me breaking, Ralph was up 10-6, playing a great set. Like maybe maybe if at 10-9, if I play a good rack or put him in a tough spot, he might give me ball in hand some which way, and I can run out and make it hill, and maybe he's got a miss in him somewhere, so it's like, or maybe I don't let him to the table. So it's like, I'll never know. And so it's a little upsetting, because I not because I lost, but because I just wanted to, I wish I would have found out. You know what I mean? Now I want to find out if I could have gotten there. And then I think back to, and it was very funny, because then I thought back to that last tournament where I lost to Jeremy Sosi on the Hill, where he let me back in the set, and then I missed a 2-ball on the Hill, and he ran out. And that would have gotten me in the Final Four, tied for third in that thing. And, man, it would have been cool. And it's like, so I thought about that. And I thought about the 7-ball I missed against Ralph. And I remember thinking, man, how come I can never just, close out a set? And then I started laughing, because I'm like, I literally closed out 2 sets, and just now. And then the last tournament, I remember I had a hill that I ran out against a good player, and when I was playing that other guy where I was up 9-8, I ended up running out the last 2 racks. So it's like, I close out sets all the time, but it's so hard when you're just take a loss and you're feeling down. It's just so hard to have any perspective. And so my point is just that there's going to be closeouts and there's going to be dogs, and that's it. And especially the one thought that was on my mind was just a vast number of players that were missing balls under pressure. I mean, international champions that I'm watching just miss 9s and meltdown. It's so common. One, I asked a top U.S. player, I'm going to leave it at that, and I saw him at the tournament. I said, how did you do it? He says, oh, I'm out. And I'm like, oh, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, you wouldn't believe it. He says, I was hill with this guy, and I had this easy 8-ball, and I choked. I dogged the 8-ball. And my opponent makes it and misses the 9 and leaves me the easy 9. And I dogged that one too. He dogged it twice on the hill, right? And I looked at him and I'm like, hey man, it happens. And he's like, it happens? It happens? You miss an 8 and a 9 on the hill? That happens? That doesn't happen. And he was just like, it was very, very funny. Like, anyway, it's just one of those things. So my point is everyone dogs it. And going back to my main point, like, there's times I dog it, there's times I don't. There's times I underperform, there's times I overperform. And in the end, and a lot of it's out of my control. Like, a lot of it comes down to whether my opponent takes advantage or not. Like, every set I won, my opponent could have Conraded me and just beat me 11-1 in 3 innings. Every set that I've ever won in pool counted on them not doing that to me. And so, just because sometimes somebody plays a great set and beats me, like, yeah, I dogged it to Ralph, but if he hadn't played a phenomenal set of pool, I would have beat him maybe if he hadn't played as good as he played, and then I'd have some hero stories. So why would I feel any worse about my performance might be good enough to get there with Ralph. If I'd played exactly how I played, it might have gotten there 3 out of 10 sets or 4 out of 10 sets with the guy. So, like, just because he turned in, like, the high end of his range and beat me, like, why should I feel bad about my performance? I don't know. It just, to me, I guess I just feel like there's what you do and your practice, and then there's how it plays out. And so, for me, I guess I think the answer to that question I said, which is, what do you tell yourself when you're upset? Or when do you get upset? It's like, well, I look at it like, did I not do my job? And what is my job? It's like, well, did I prepare? Did I put in the practice coming into the tournament? Did I spend the time, like, mentally preparing, physically preparing, trying to think about the challenges I was going to be up against, like the shot clock on the break template. Like, I knew it was one on the spot with a break template, and there was going to be a lot of racks run. I knew we were going to be a shot clock. So what do? We practiced our break with a one on the spot, and I practiced with a shot clock, and I hit a bunch of balls. And it's like, so I did my preparation. I tried to prepare for the situations I would be in, and then I fought to the best of my ability. And that's all I can do. And then sometimes it's going to work, and I'm going to play good. Sometimes it's not going to work, or I'm going to play bad. But, like, I guess I just kind of judge myself more on, like, did I do the things that I'm supposed to do? Because kind of like what I go back to with that whole, if you have a good plan, it's going to work. Like, I feel like as long as I'm sticking to a plan that will work and take me where I want to go, then I don't have to really get too high and low about whether or not, this set went my way or not. I just look at more, am I on the road that I committed to being on that's going to take me where I want to go? And I'm not saying, like, you shouldn't be upset. If you look at it with the right perspective, you shouldn't have emotions. Like, no, you have emotions after a loss, of course. But for me, like, I hold my wins pretty lightly, and I don't hold on to them too tightly, because I take it with a grain of salt that things had to go my way. And I guess I kind of shrug off the losses for the same reason. Better than I used to, anyway. Better than I used to. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep. I think that does. I was thinking there's another thing I was thinking as far as one of the reasons getting upset or whatever is that I'm older. I'm 48 years old, and I'm like, I've been playing for a long time, and it's a lot of start and stops with playing and family and work and things, but it's like I've put in a ton of work lately, in the last year and a half or so, and it just feels like how can I be learning? Like, how can that always be my answer? And these are just feelings. Like, and I'm kind of laughing and saying, well, it's because that's the answer. But it's like, I think that's it. It's like, I did learn a ton, so what I'd say is I did learn a ton, and that's awesome. And that's one of the reasons why I went out there, if not the whole reason, is to keep learning and keep playing. It's just funny to be 48 years old and have played so long and to be learning. And I guess the reason why, if I was to break that down in my head and say, well, instead of being negative about that, be positive, it's like, well, I haven't been playing a ton of pro tournaments, so it makes sense that there is a ton to learn because, because I'm out there doing things that I haven't done a lot of, and I'm just trying. So that was one thing I wanted to share. And then, all right, so then my last takeaway on it, real quick, was David Alcade. We were lucky enough to sit, like, on the, tables like 4, 5 feet, 6 feet away from the table. We're sitting there sweating his match. And that was super eye-opening. Like, I'm not a huge pool sweater, and it's been a mistake, because watching David Alcade was really worth the trip for me, honestly. Talk about learning and things learned. Like the way that he composes himself, the way that he strikes the ball, the way that the shots, not even like the shots or the patterns or anything. It's more what he's doing and how he's doing it is very calm. And so that was super eye-opening. Like that was a massive takeaway. And I have, we went and played that later that night or something, and I've immediately implemented ways to be more calm in my game. And then when I played snooker with Terry, I was working on the same thing. And some of it's kind of a pre-shot thing or whatever you want to call it, but it's definitely it was a huge takeaway. That guy's an awesome player, and everyone's awesome, right? All these 780, 800, low 800, all these guys are killers. It just he struck me, and it was pretty awesome. So that was a cool takeaway.
Yeah, I think that kind of reminds me of something I was talking about in the last pod, which is like what it's like to train in person versus Zoom, and like what comes to mind is that game that people played as I don't know if you ever did this in school as like a first grader or second grader. I did this where they'd say like draw a box. Now to the right of the box, draw a circle, and then they give like a series of directions, and you'd have to like draw it based on their verbal directions. And then at the end, everybody held up their picture, and everybody followed the same directions, but their pictures looked nothing alike because some people drew different colored boxes, or different circles, or different size boxes, whatever. And people's interpretation of those things were so different. And did you ever do that or no?
No, but it sounds. I get it.
So it was weird. And so anyway, I thought about that, and it's like people that are like watching pool on a video. I'm telling. I used to when I was a kid. I soaked it up. I watched like a ton of AccuStats matches. I don't really enjoy watching pool on video anymore because I have a pretty good understanding of the strategy of the game and the patterns that they play. But what I do like is when I'm watching ringside and I'm 5 feet away from the player, it's an entirely different experience. And it's like, and it's one that doesn't lend itself well to words and rational thought and analysis, because Josh could sit there and say, what struck me was how calm he was. And it's like, yeah, what does that really mean? I don't know. He was calm. Okay. But like, that's not powerful. But when you sit there and watch a guy handle more pressure than you've faced before in your life, and just meet it head on and meet the adversity head on and just be like, so, you're like, you could feel what he's feeling. When you're watching on a video, you're just kind of watching people, you're watching a movie of people shooting balls in. But when you're there live, it's like you could feel what they're thinking and how they're breathing. You could see, you could hear when they take breaths and how they, you could really see their pace and how what they're doing in the chair, and all of that. Like I said, I can't find words for it, but all of it builds up to like an experience that's much more much more personal.
And you feel how you would feel in that situation, because we watched that match from the leg on, and so we know the whole dynamic and the ebb and flow and how the rolls are going and what's happening and what a person has to come with and what adversity they're facing and what adversity you would be facing if you were in that match. It's very intimate when you're that close, and it's impossible to catch that through video, and it's impossible to catch that as much through the stands. But when we were 5 feet away from it, that was like, it wasn't life changing for me, but it was game changing, and it was very, very, very critical. And and it was awesome, man.
Yeah, and so like kind of going back to my boot camp point from last time, it's like that's the biggest thing, man. When people spend 3 days with me, there are so many things that you can't stuff it into a syllabus, or here's some I took some note about make sure that I'm do this or that. It's like there's so many things that people pick up when they're just side by side with me and we're taking turns hitting balls, because it's like just do this, and then they just start doing it, and a lot of it doesn't lend itself well to instruct. And frankly, like I've talked about this before too, but like the conscious controlling self-one, instructional analytical part of us is not a very good pool player. So to think that we're just going to learn by understanding analytically and rationally all the steps that go into a great pool game and then forcing ourselves to duplicate them, to think that that's the path to great pool, it's kind of absurd. Like that's not how anybody gets great. Like people get great by playing great players and sponging and osmosis and mirroring and like just competing and getting there, so anyway, that's what I think is important. And yeah, I was inspired. I thought that was the most fun I had in that tournament, was watching that set with. So good shooting, David Elcade. He didn't make the final four, but he played a tremendous game, and I have a lot of respect for him, man. He's a heck of a competitor. So good. So okay. So then, did I learn? I didn't really learn much on the trip as far as my takeaways, because it was just actually, that's kind of in a way that's like I learned something, which is that I'm on the right track. Like, I understand that the break is crucial, and that's why I'm working on it. And I'm going to the 10-ball tournament in Ohio here in a month, and my 10-ball break is going to be a big part of my consciousness, as always. And then I learned that, you know, pressure's tough, and everybody dogs it, and everybody, you know, and that the goal is not to get to where you never dog it. The goal is to get where you sometimes don't dog it, and that I sometimes don't dog it, and that's great. And so I'm proud of the fact that I've built myself into a player that doesn't always dog it. And then I'm happy with, I've been kind of, you know, working on some things, and it's showing up in my game, and I feel pretty good about how I'm hitting them. And then I've got a chance to see better players and how good they can play, and it's inspiring to want to keep going. So in terms of like what my focus is on my own personal development, not really a lot different, other than just re-inspiring to know that the work I'm doing is helpful, and it can help win me, you know, sets that I might not have won in the past, and that there's more work to be done, because had I been able to run a couple more racks off the break during my set with Ralph, maybe I could make it go the other way, and maybe that's, you know, I'm only you know, one better break and one better shot away from, you know, getting even further next time. So, well, potentially, depending on how things play out. So anyway, just seeing that I've gone far enough to get some ways, and that it's not out of my reach to get a little further. So it's exciting. So cool. Anything else, Josh, or should we go on to the side quest thing here?
No, I think, yeah, we're good. We're good.
Awesome. All right, so topic conversation. Let's see, how do we want to kick? So I was going to call it side quests, and I guess from an overview, I was thinking about, you know, when we start playing pool, and when we all catch the pool bug, we all start with the goal of getting as good as we can. I mean, well, not everybody, and I shouldn't speak for everybody. I mean, maybe, but I think that there's a lot of people that never set that goal. There's a lot of people that never say, I want to see if I can get really good at this game. There's plenty of people that play recreationally and socially, and so for any of those people listening to the podcast, you know, we love you, and we're glad to have you as part of our pool community. But I think that there's a time that happens to many of us, where many of us are bit with a pool bug, where we decide at one point that our goal is going to be to get as good as we can. And what that means, like a certain level of winning certain tournaments, or beating a certain player, or reaching a certain resume, or just running a certain number of balls, or just playing good, whatever that means. But somewhere, some kind of goal of getting good, right? Pretty universal.
Yep.
And then it seems like that would always be the goal. Like, that would always be the goal. But sometimes that doesn't happen. It seems like somewhere along the lines, people get diverted. And I think there's reasons for that. But Josh, what are your thoughts, before I go too far, what are your thoughts on side quests? Like, what does that mean to you? Like, why would somebody ever lose sight of their primary objective?
I think because people, well, there's a lot of reasons, but some of them could be ego, some of them could be pride, some of them could be just not knowing, like not having the right sort of people around you, or having the right information, and so, or listening to the wrong information. Like, it's like there's a lot of different reasons why people can get down side paths. But yeah, I think some of those things.
Yeah. So I have a couple of examples just to kind of get the conversation started. So, like, I'll throw out a few. Let's see if I can remember. So one I've talked about in the past is the fundamentals quest. And I guess what I mean by a side quest is, like, if the primary objective is to play as good as we can, then somewhere along the lines, somebody decides that to get the primary objective, to play as good as we can, the way to do that is by achieving some other objective that's like a smaller quest within the major objective. So they say, if I do X, Y, Z, that is going to help me play the best I can. That is the way that I'll play the best I can. It's if I achieve X, Y, Z, or if I do X, Y, Z.
If I work on X, Y, Z, yeah.
And then their goal becomes to get X, Y, Z. And they lose, and that becomes their whole quest, and their whole purpose is X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z. And they pursue that, and they almost And they sometimes they lose sight of, is this even taking them closer to their goal of overall improvement? But they told themselves a long time ago that if I do X, Y, Z, it's going to get me better, and that's the right road. And so they just follow that indefinitely and stubbornly and unwaveringly, even if it isn't the right road at a certain point. And so some examples would be like, so somebody who's like, I want to play my best and I want to get great at pool. And the way I'm going to do that is by having machine-like fundamentals. So this, I've talked about it before, but this is just an example, is that then they say, now I need to develop machine-like fundamentals. And after months and years of stroking into a Coke bottle and trying to make themselves into a machine, their goal is now a quest for fundamentals. Like that is their goal. Like if you ask them, like, why do you play pool? It's like, well, I'm trying to improve my fundamentals. And it's like, they take it for granted that, well, that's because if I do that, then I'll get better. But it's like, here's the thing.
Or if someone asks them, how do you get good at pool, or what's holding this player back or that player back, no matter the level of the player, they'll say fundamentals, potentially.
Yeah, they're absolutely, because they've decided in their mind, they've decided that fundamentals equates to improvement. And that was a decision that they made to believe that and to act as if that's true. But they never question or challenge or revisit that, because they're operating with it's almost like a faulty assumption. It's like when people are doing a diagnostic troubleshoot, and it's like, you just assume that it's like I just read Zen of the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and there was a scene where the guy was like, he had decided that he had gas in his tank, and he knew that the problem was an electrical system. So he spent like hours and hours trying to troubleshoot his motorcycle, and called off his trip and hauled the bike back and canceled his vacation with his son, and then it turns out there had been no gas in the tank, but he had already made the faulty assumption that the issue was electrical based on blah blah blah. It doesn't matter. So anyways, like I think about that, like we're troubleshooting our pool game. That's what we're doing. And you can't, when you're a troubleshooter, you don't get to make a bad assumption. And so to sit there and declare fundamentals are my road to success, and then I'm going to take that as like doctrine. Like if you do that, you're in danger of going down a path that might not actually lead you where you originally thought it would lead you. Other examples that I could think of were like, let's see here. I've got them written down because I knew that this would happen to me. So another example would be, an information quest. That was a good one. Is people who are like, pool is a game of knowledge. It's a game of strategy. It's a game of knowledge of how the cue ball works. It's a game of knowledge of safeties, and it's a game of it's just a game of knowledge. And so therefore, I'm going to go on this quest to be incredibly knowledgeable. And I'm going to know how to move. This is why, I'm going to learn to outmove people. And I'm going to learn the right shots. And I'm going to learn the right patterns. And I'm going to learn the right strategies. And I'm going to know more about why balls skid and how the template breaks. And I'm going to know so much about which balls in the rack are dead. And I've watched all the videos about, how to break a 9-ball rack. And I've watched, I know so much. And so somewhere along the lines, players decide, pool is a game of acquiring knowledge. The most knowledgeable player will be successful. And then they go on these long quests to where it's like, the fact is that, all of these things are important to a point, fundamentals of knowledge, but like, I don't know. I mean, it didn't really seem like what got Carlo Beato across the finish line was that he was more knowledgeable than the rest of the field, necessarily. Like, I didn't, maybe poor example, but like, who says that, why did we make that assumption that if we got really, really, really knowledgeable, that would just translate to pool greatness? It's like, well, the fact is that there's problems with that. And there's problems with the fundamentals. The problems with the knowledge thing is that self-one, the teller, the analytical part of us is not very good at performing. And that the people that live in their head too much and focus too much on the analytical side, oftentimes they struggle to execute. And it's almost like people that are on a side quest for knowledge. It's almost like they have a different hobby than I do, because I'm a competitor where I'm trying to get better, and they're just trying to like play a game of like who knows the most and who can talk about it. And this one came to mind because when we were playing at that billiard club, there was a player who was like, every single shot he shot, he was talking about like why he missed, or how how the spin took on that, or how it lengthened because of this, or that ball, with the other spin, that ball worms its way in the hole, or just like, it's like he's doing this nonstop performance about how knowledgeable he is, but he's not playing well. And it's just like, what's your goal here, man? it just makes me wonder, like, why? Is your goal to play well, or is your goal to impress everybody with how much you know? And at times, do you feel betrayed because, like, I know so much, how come I haven't gotten better? And then you just feel like you were betrayed by talent? But it's like, no, you betrayed yourself when you made yourself this proclamation that knowledge would elevate you above your competition, and now you're feeling betrayed and stuck because it's not panning out that way, but you never revisited that premise.
Yep. Yeah. It's interesting to watch from the outside, to watch the guy playing billiards, and to have him just nonstop prattling information and spewing information. He was playing a young player that he could play some billiards, the kid that worked there, and it was just interesting to watch, because I'm sitting there thinking, well, are you a pool player or are you a commentator? And so I just think it's just, and I know for myself, man, it's like I've got off on side journeys and side distractions, and that's what I work on myself, is like, hey, what am I doing? Like, what is my mind like? So I understand that I can do these things too, and it's like but it's more of a thing where trying to be self-aware, trying to watch and see what I'm doing and correct those things and tamp them out and try to just work on the performance side of it and the actual playing side of it. So yeah.
So I've been kind of wondering, like, why do people fall into that? And there's a few reasons, but let's start with the big one first. It's like, I'll tell you, all I can say is, and all real competitors know this, there's nothing more difficult than competing and holding yourself accountable for improving. Because when you're trying to improve, there's 100 things that you need to do to get better, and 10 of them you love doing, 80 of them you can do and it's not that bad, and 10 of them are like very, very, very difficult, challenging for a number of reasons. Sometimes they're overwhelmingly difficult. Sometimes they're overwhelmingly terrifying. Sometimes there's just negative emotions of feelings of incompetence and helplessness and stuckness and insufficiency and victimization and all these things, like, I don't know how I can do any better than this, and how can, I've already tried so hard, and there's some things that are so scary and so uncomfortable that we would rather do anything in the world except for face that. And so one reason people might go on these side quests is because if they tell themselves that pool, if they like learning stuff and understanding kicking systems, and if they like, that's what they're going to do. It's like they're on a side quest where they're going to know every kicking system under the sun and be able to talk about, point on the wall and +2 this, and literally just sit there and, talk about how you can adjust for tables and all this stuff. But it's like, they'd rather do that than face their fears. And it's like did you ever read 1984? Sorry, random.
Probably in high school.
Okay, so there's this scene where the guy gets taken to the Ministry of Love and he's going to be tortured. And they tell him, there's references to like room 101. We're going to take him to room 101. And he asked the guy when he was going to be tortured, he's like, what's in room 101? And nobody would tell him. Nobody would tell him what's in room 101. And finally, when he gets to room 101, the guy, it's been like months, and they take him to room 101 and they say, you know what's in room 101. Everyone knows what's in room 101. It's the worst thing imaginable. And it's like everybody, for him it was rats. He had this like phobia that he didn't even know, but somewhere in the deep of his subconscious he had this horror of rats. And so for him it was customized something about rats. And it's like, basically everyone has a room 101. Everyone has something that's like overwhelmingly difficult and scary, and we shy away from it, man. And so sometimes people go on side quests because they want to shy away from the hard things that they have to do, and they want to steer into the things that they enjoy doing. What do you think of that as one reason?
Yeah, for sure. I'm just thinking about my own side quest.
Yeah.
Because we talked about it, like, yeah, we can get into that later if you want, or we can talk about it now, but like, yeah, we talked about it coming back, and it's like, I have a phobia of playing in front of people. I would say had at this point almost, like throughout my career, throughout my life, I just do not like playing in front of people. It's awful with pool because you're always playing in front of people, and the better I got, the more people are watching, and so it's an awful thing to have to go through. And but so what that did was it caused me a side quest where I'm like, I'm just going to out-volume this. So I'm just going to go to my garage and hulk out and play, thousands of racks of pool and dozens and dozens of hours, and I'm just going to build this monster game and all this stuff. And so that became a little bit of a side quest for me where I'm like, volume. And then I realized, well, shoot, man, like, I can do all that. But then when I go out and play and someone starts watching and people start chirping at me, because that's what happens in a pool room. Like when I put my queue together, people pull up chairs like locally, and then they start chirping because they want to be part of what you're doing and be part of the action. They have their own side quest, right, where they want to be part of the action. So it's like it was screwing me up. So I started playing more at pool rooms and working through that, and in challenging myself to go out and play in situations where people are watching and things like that. And then that became another side quest because now I had this narrative or this thing where, well, I'm having a tough time finding action. People, I'm trying to call people, get them to play. Well, Demi challenged me on the way home, and he's like, you could play this person, you could play this person, you could play this person. And I'm like, it just cut to me, man. It cut to me in my gut, and I'm like, yeah, you're right, man. It's like I get why I was on my side quest of with playing players that are not at my level, but publicly. Like, that was my baby steps, man. My training wheels to get out of my garage. And now, Demi challenged me to up my game and play people that are more challenging to me. So what I did was, I immediately got on and messaged 3 or 4 people that he named off. I immediately messaged them. I'm like, all right, let's do it, man. I'm going to play these guys. And they're guys, one of the guys I had played before, but I came up with all these excuses why I don't want to play him again. And it's like, because he's tough action. And so, whatever, man. It's like, I got him the last time we played, and it's just, whatever my bullshit is, right? It's just like, I got past it, and I challenged myself to get off of my other side quests and to move forward and to challenge myself and get up. Like, I'm just talking about comfort zone, man, like facing fears and facing all these fake reasons in my head to avoid discomfort.
So just to kind of stick to the, not to say you're not sticking to the format, but just to recap in the format that we're talking. So your original side quest was and by the way, when I say a side quest, I'm not saying that there's not value, because in all these things, knowledge, fundamentals, all these things.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I look at it like a chain, and each one is a link. And so originally, you said volume is my answer. I am on a quest for volume. Volume will equal improvement. And so you were so focused on volume that you maybe, and I'm not saying this was bad either, because you didn't do this for 20 years and not get better. And that's where I think that you're not in a trap. I would say that there's healthy learning, there's unhealthy learning. And I think for you, what you did that was right was you were on a side quest for volume, and then after 6 months you went back and said, how's this working for me? And the answer is it's working very well in a lot of ways, but it hasn't improved in some key areas, which is playing in front of an audience. So therefore, I need to address that. So then you started playing in front of an audience, and you were running that for a while, but it was maybe against competition that wasn't challenging enough. And so then you got to look at, now you're revisiting that and saying, how is that working? Well, that's good, except that I might need to book more losers. And you have these reasons why you might not want to make these games, but then at the heart of it is it sucks to lose, and it's not much fun. And so, but then you're like, okay, well, now that I've identified that, I will adjust my sails once again and steer right in, and I'm going to go ahead and book a few losers, or not necessarily. I'm not saying you're going to lose, but you know what I mean. Like, you're going to book a few sessions that might not be very fun.
Yeah.
But that, and so I actually think that that's a good example of how to avoid falling into a side quest. Like, I think that you're constantly making decisions as to what you think you need to do to improve, but then you're revisiting it and you're changing your ideas and your beliefs about what has to happen based on the feedback of your performances. I think that's perfect.
Yeah, and I'll pat myself on the back, Demi, and I'll say, when I was thinking about it, I'm like, man, I think I'm doing good. I think I'm doing it right.
Yeah, that's good.
I can get down a little bit of a side quest or a tiny rabbit hole, but then eventually I'll see where it falls short and I'll adjust. And what we're seeing, I think, Dem, is that we see people that have been on decade-long side quests, and that is not effective. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so So, I'm trying to think. I kind of feel like I try to operate similar to that. I mean, for sure, we've all gotten stuck on stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong. We all get stuck on stuff where, maybe we overemphasize one thing for a while, or we get too much down one thing. But I think we're both, kind of self-aware in that way, and we're very challenging of our own. We're constantly challenging our action plans of what we're doing, and then we talk to each other, and that's great to have a good partner that can look at stuff and challenge us.
And we play with each other.
Yeah.
We have different skill sets. So when you and I play together, like, we literally practice side by side and drill, and you can see some things that I do that you don't do, and I can see things that you do that I don't do, and we can learn from that and be challenged by that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think that's a big thing for us both.
And I think the one way that I would say I don't go off on many side quests is that at the end of the day, I always look at, like, I'm so laser focused on my overall goal, which is my goal is improvement, and that's what I want. And the reason that competition is meaningful to me is because it forces you to take the path. It's like the difference. I was talking to somebody about the difference between 8-ball and 9-ball. How in 8-ball you get to pick your pattern, and in 9-ball the table forces you. Like, pool is a game where improving at pool, it's like playing 9-ball. Like, you don't get to decide what order to run the balls in because that's easy. You have to run them in the order they lay on the table, like it or not. And that's how, if you want to get better at pool, man, one of the reasons that competition is so meaningful is because you have to do what you have to do, even if it's scary and hard and difficult. And if you take that out and you say, I'm going to play pool the way I want to play pool and work on the things that are fun to work on and see where that gets me, then, I don't want to say you're not a real competitor, but you're not a real competitor. Like, in my mind, you're kind of letting yourself off the hook. Like, the whole point of competition, the whole point of saying, I am going to be the best that I can be, is that when you make that commitment to yourself, you know what you're signing up for, which is looking in room 101 and facing those rats. Like, that's it. That's what you're signing up for. And if you accept anything less than that and just say, well, I'll try and see where it goes, it's like, well, you're gonna squirm away and find yourself on a side quest, and you're gonna be the most knowledgeable guy in the pool hall that can't run the table. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's one reason, is people shy away because of fear of facing discomfort. Now, there's another reason that you mentioned, Josh. You said ego. So tell me, what do you think that meant when you said ego is a reason?
I was going to also add personality type. I mean, it's a little bit different, because if you study personality types, people, if you don't know you don't know what you don't know. But, like, people have different personality types, and so I think ego and personality types can lend to kind of getting stuck on a side quest and kind of stubbornness. So, yeah, I mean, if you can't admit that you don't know, or you can't admit that what you've been doing isn't working, that can be ego driven. Like, well, if I admit that, then everything, I'm not this player that I think I am, or this person that I think I am. It's we all struggle with ego, and ego pushes us in a lot of, like, forward momentum, because we're in a hierarchy and we're playing and we're fighting, right, for those points. But it can also, you can get caught in it and trapped in it and stuck in it. And I think, like, I've seen people talk about the way they view the game, and it just, they get stuck on these side quests, like we're talking, and I don't know, Deb, bail me out, man.
Yeah, I think
you
that
probably can tell better.
There's a question that I always liked, which is, would you rather be right, or would you rather get better? It's like, There's plenty of people I know that it seems like they'd rather be right and not get better than they would rather be wrong and have to do it a different way, but then improve because they have an open mind about, being corrected. And it just seems like, for a lot of players, they would rather be right and not get better.
It's a sponge in the bowl, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if we talked about it in the podcast.
Yeah, I've talked about that.
Yeah,
And it's like,
or you've talked about it.
Recap.
Yeah.
Go ahead, recap. Sorry.
Oh, just like, and that's kind of a personality type thing. It's like, are you a sponge, or are you a bull, or are you a little bit of both? It's like, I think.
So the sponge is somebody who's like, so the bull is somebody who's really, really stubborn and will never change their mind or their beliefs. And the sponge is somebody who's so wishy-washy that anytime anybody makes a suggestion, they change their game every day because they're, and so there's a balance where you've got to be open-minded enough to find, outside, feedback and to, challenge yourself without being so wishy-washy that you don't even have a baseline game because every day you're starting from scratch and you're kind of scattered with the wind. You've got to be able to filter information. You've got to be able to listen to a bunch of information from people that you trust, filter through it, be open-minded to like accepting what belongs, and then trusting yourself to know how it comes together and what you need to filter out. That's it.
Yeah, which is so impossibly hard to do, but that's part of the journey, is trying to figure out how to do that, how to turn those dials, I think.
And we know people that are very bullish, like there's someone we know that, I don't know, maybe he doesn't matter. I'll just say that. Can I tell about the braking really hard?
Oh, sure.
So there's someone we know that brakes like full speed, absolutely wants to crush the brake, and it's like you can tell when he brakes. It's like every time he brakes, it's like, well, this is how Shane Van Bonen hit the balls, and you got to brake like this. And if you don't brake 23 miles an hour and pop the cue ball back, then you're a sucker. And it's like, so it's like, it's just kind of funny though, because it's like sometimes there's tables where maybe on that table a medium speed 18 mile an hour brake is more effective. And when you brake harder, the balls react differently than when you brake medium speed. And so if the side pocket balls behind the one aren't going, maybe you'd be better off with a little bit of a lesser hit. But instead of like being interested in that or like changing up the strategy, it's like, nope, good players can smash the rack at 23 and pop the rock every time and make a ball and will something in. And so like they just decided that that's how it's done, and they're dying on that hill, and they've broken very inconsistently for many years, and it could be a limiting factor in this person's career, but they're not open for discussion, just closed case,
And when in the past when I've said, hey, I want to talk to you about your break, and I'm not a guy that's going to be doling out advice to anybody. I got my own problems, but I mean, to me, if I see if I care about somebody and we're training together or playing together, I want to share something a little bit once in a while. And he shares stuff with me, and I'm more like bull sponge mix. I'm not like perfect, but I feel like I'm a good mix of bull and sponge. So and he's good at sharing information with me, like very infrequently, but it's very helpful. So I want to kind of pay him back, and I'm watching, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, braking's all about changing your speed and your angle to try to pocket balls, right? It's speed and angle. What angle are you coming in from, and what speed are you hitting them at?
There's a dynamic here.
Yeah,
it's exactly. You and the rack.
Yeah.
It's not just you.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, it just seems very straightforward to me. And when I watch players, you have to adjust. You have to adjust your speed. You have to adjust your angle, and that's how you dial in braking a rack. And I'm not some expert at braking by any stretch, but I'm around a lot of like players, and I see what they're doing, and I watch them on video, and it's like they're changing speed and they're changing angle. And so I'm just kind of tapping him on the shoulder, and I'm like, hey man, like, let's talk about this. And it's just absolutely nope, we're not talking about it. This is the way it is. Don't talk to me about my brake. And I'm just like thinking, well, okay. And meanwhile, there was a time, it's better now, but he would pop the cue ball off the table in a race to 9 2 or 3 times. And so that to me, at the level that we're playing at, is just like popping it off once is probably a loser not for the set or whatever, but kind of. I mean, it's a big deal, and it's just it's fine, and
it's okay.
It's okay. Everything's fine. It's okay. No, it's one of those things where it's like just very, very 100% bull, no sponge. And I just think, man, it'd be cool if for overall development, if just a little bit more sponge. And it's not like I'm sitting there, like showering ideas, and it's not some freaking brainstorm session, man. It's like I'm like a desert, bro.
You sit back for 3 years playing sets without saying anything. Then after 3 years of watching him pop the ball off the table, like, hey man, food for thought. Like here's what works for me on the break, and he's like, no, you're not Shane.
Yeah, exactly. Nope, needs to be hit hard and popped. And it's like even Shane doesn't hit at a 23 every time. I mean, he's gonna change speed and angle, and that's it. So that's it, man.
So very good.
That's an example.
So we've come up with a couple reasons. One is to avoid the room 101, the thing you're scared of. Another thing is because you'd rather be right than good. And there's and oftentimes it's because it's something that you're good at. Like maybe somebody really is good at something. Like I'm really, really good at, okay, so like maybe there's a guy who's just like I've seen this too, where people are really hung up on stroke shots and power shots and like difficult shots, and all they want to do is work on difficult shots. And I'm watching them play, and I'm like, man, that's not going to get you better because you already hit difficult shots as well as I do. But there's like 18 areas where you're spewing, and you're not playing nearly as well in other areas as I play. And so you can sit there and try to work on your difficult shots all day long, but you already hit them so good that it's going to be hard to make improvement in those areas. And meanwhile, it's going to be hard to make improvement even if you improve in those areas, as long as you're spewing in all these other areas. For example, if a guy scratched on every break, just as a stupid example, if he scratched at every break and then he was practicing hard shots, it's like at some point you'd be like, hey man, doesn't matter how good you get at hard shots. If you scratch at every break, like you've got another problem that you got to fix. But it's like, no, I'm going to shoot I'm going to turn into where I never miss, and then I'll be okay. So I had multiple students that do this, where they're just practicing stroke shots. And then I'm telling them like, hey, don't worry. Like, that's not what's holding you back right now. Like if you're a 550 Fargo and you're not winning local tournaments, it's not because you're not drawing the ball 20 feet. It's something else is going on here that we need to look at. But it's like I tell them, and I come out of the bathroom and I see what shots they're practicing, and they're practicing power draws. And I'm just like, my God, like, no. Somebody asked me, can we work a little bit on length of the table draws? I'm like, nope. No, we can't, because that's not where if you get to be 750 and you want to try to figure out how to get to 800, then we can go back and look at those power draws. But like, you don't need it. Like, I'll tell you what, I'll play a 700, I'll spot him the power, I'll spot him length of the table draws. How about that? It's like just not necessary. And it's not, anyway, that's an example of a side quest. It's like, I'm just going to shoot everything in the hole. And not get, where they're leaking in other areas. And so the point of why do people do that is, one reason is ego, one reason is afraid of 101, one reason is because people just like working on that part of the game. And so they tell themselves, this game is about doing what I love the best. So whoever's the best at this area that I love practicing, that's what's gonna,
gonna get there. Yeah.
So people that I love working on their form, it's like, this is a game of form, and then I'll just work on my form all the time. Or people that like pattern. I'm a guy that loves analytics and patterns. I could sit there and tell myself, this is a game of strategy, and so I'm just gonna study strategy. And it's like, well, that's great, except I don't think that I lose out of tournaments because I don't know how to play patterns. I think I've got other problems. You know what I mean? Now, that doesn't mean that you can't strengthen strengths and use them to set you apart in many ways. And I think that's great. But there's a point where it goes from being, developing your strengths so that you can be explosive in parts of the game, to being pigeonholed as the guy that shoots straight but scratches on every break. And at some point, you got to challenge yourself. And so we've talked about as like a definition of like what a side quest is, why people might go down those side quests and get stuck, and some examples of those. And I think then,
how do you keep from going on a side quest?
And I think we kind of talked about that too, is how to avoid it, which is you have to be a couple things. So we talked about first of all, at the top of your questions, at the top of your goal always has to be the ultimate. The bottom line is the bottom line. Am I getting better? Am I getting better? Am I breaking through? Am I improving? And if you hold yourself to any other measuring stick, then it's kind of a side quest. Like if you say, well, I'm not getting better yet, but wait until my stroke is perfect, then they'll see. It's like, no, that's a side quest. Like, are you improving? Yes or no? Like that's the first thing. If you're using any other compass, then you're setting yourself up to squirm away from something difficult. Thoughts?
Yeah. So my question, Demi, is, which is almost impossible to answer because everybody's so individual and everybody's kind of stuck in their own mind and their own stuff. It's just, what tips do you have to help somebody become self-aware in the moment and try to figure that? Like, which is almost impossible. It's like, well, how do you, like, defining like the definite, well, like, how do you find peace in your life?
So the first question though is to stay laser focused on, am I getting better? And anybody that's listening, if you can't answer yes to that question, then you are not doing it right. Like, pool is not a game that there's the only reason to be stuck is if you're going the wrong direction. Like, that's it. There's no way that you could put in time and effort in this game and not see improvement unless you're not putting the pieces together right. I mean, I think. Do you disagree or agree with that?
No, I agree with that. I just would say, I could just see from someone's standpoint to say, well, I mean, well, my answer would be,
you don't know me, like the person on the talk show. You don't know me. Yeah. You don't know anything about me. Everyone's cheering at him.
What's that?
You always see that on like the old talk shows,
like Jerry Springer or something.
Yeah. You don't know me. Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's funny. It's like, how do you, and then it goes to a shameless plug for you with MN Pool Boot Camp, but it's like, well, how do you know if you don't know, and how do you figure it out if you can't figure it out? And it's like, well, then you got to get with the right person to help, and it's going to be more than just, help you put together a plan. That's what I would say. Like, I'm fortunate. I've been traveling for 15 years, and so, like, I get the full blown, boot camp all the time. We talk every day, so it's been great. And I have some other friends. Brian Brecky's helped me tremendously with my game. He's given me like tremendous advice and critical points. So I'm very fortunate to have some really, really high level peers. But if you don't have high level peers and you're out there and you're on your own, sort of, and you're trying to figure it out, I could see a person being like, "Bleep you, I can't figure it out," and you think you know everything. And I'm not saying they're saying that, but I'm like, what do you do for that person that says, "How do I know what I don't know, and how do you figure it out?"
Well, okay, so the first thing is that you have to assume, you have to operate with these assumptions that if you're not getting better, you're doing something wrong, and that if you're putting in time and energy, and then you have to, and the ultimate compass has to be, am I getting better? That's the ultimate compass, and you can't lose sight of that. That's the first part. And then if that is your compass, and you're like, I'm not getting better,
how do I put in the right work?
Then some of the questions you can ask are like, okay, let's look at how are things actually playing out. Like, for example, I'll give you examples. I watched a match, and I'm really proud of this guy. I have one of the guys I've worked with a little bit, and really, really good guy. I'm rooting for him a lot. And so he played a money match where about a month ago, it didn't go so well. He lost, and he missed a number of key shots. And I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to build it. I'll just say there was a specific situation that was a recurring situation where he was coming up short and failing to execute. And this was like, they were just, chokes. That's what to call it anything else would be to confuse the issue. It was a series of chokes. And when I talked to him about how the match went, he told me, well, I was, I don't even remember. It was like, I was struggling with my break, and, something was, I was dealing with something with the way the table was playing. And I'm like, no, that's not it. Because if that was it, then it would have burned you here and here on that transition. It wouldn't have burned you at that straight at 8 ball in the corner. Oh, gosh, you know what I mean? That's not how that plays out. Like we could be like, this is not I'm sorry, but no, that's not what happened here. And so I told him, I said, here's what I saw happen. And I just called him on it. I said, I'm not shame on you. There's nothing. In fact, I'm proud of you. If you get in a spot where you're choking, good for you to put yourself in a tough situation where you're going to get, tested. I mean, it's the people that don't choke that I'm kind of ashamed of. It's like, that's the people. Shame on you. If you haven't choked in the last few months, then you've been hiding under a rock and you need to get out there. So that's how I feel.
Duck in the tough stuff.
Yeah. So it's like, I think there's a badge of pride. Like, on the one hand, it's never fun to blow it against Ralph's UK. On the other hand, it's like, I could tell you 2 big tournaments I've choked out of in the last few months. Can you? So you know what I mean? It's like, that's how I feel. But anyway, so I told him, I said, no, this is the issue. And here's what I think is causing it, is here's the person you're playing, here's what they're doing, here's where I think the narrative it's creating that's causing this pressure, here's what I suggest you do to handle it. Now, I'm not suggesting that he didn't, like, play it exactly the way I'd play it, maybe with how he mentally prepares or whatever, but what he did is he owned it. He said, yeah, that's true, that makes sense. And because here's the thing, is he wants to win more than he wants to be right, and more than, and so he thought about it, and he's like, yeah, you're right. I can see how I didn't put myself in a spot where I was ready to take the win. And then, I don't know, I might have made zero impact. I don't want to, take credit for something he did, but, he prepared hard. And you know what? He rematched the guy, and I got to watch a little bit of it the other night, and he finished the guy off. It was 17-17 going to 21, and he won the last 4 games. And he did what he needed to do, where before he would have maybe not completed those racks. You could tell he put himself in a state. I mean, I could tell watching him play, he was in a totally different state of mind than he was the first match. And that took looking in the mirror, owning up to the things that weren't working, putting together a plan to deal with them. Now, in the real world, that doesn't always mean you get to win the second set. That's not how that works. But in that set.
But in this case, it did, which is awesome.
In this case, the actual Guapo. So in this case,
Guapo.
In this case,
that was awesome.
That's the point. Is that it doesn't mean you're always going to have it win, but it means that sometimes it does work, and that time it did work,
and that puts you in a position to have it, give yourself a chance.
You give yourself a good opportunity, you know, and so I was really proud of him, and so that's an example of how you can be. So you have to look at what's not working in a set and look at it and say, you know, why isn't this working, and you know, realistically, what went wrong. And it is hard because you're right about something, Josh, is you don't always know what you don't know. For example, if somebody misses a shot, you know, it's like all runs end by a miss. But it's like, was that a miss because you failed to execute a shot that was routine? Was it a miss because you put yourself in a bad spot and had a tough shot that you shouldn't have been in that spot? Or was it a miss because there was something you didn't know about, there was knowledge about patterns or cue ball that you were lacking, that even you left yourself in a suboptimal angle to where it was harder to get good position, so you left yourself a bad positional play, and then you landed on a line and then you missed. It's like, well, the issue wasn't the miss, the issue wasn't even that you got on a line, the issue is the way you tried to get it, the position. And so, but you might not know that, and so that's where, yes, seeking out knowledge from better players. And I'm not just talking knowledge, I'm talking seeking out, you know, opportunities to watch better players, play with better players, talk to better players, and train with better players. Yes. And yes, the top players do that. They call it tournaments because they play better players, or they play great players all the time. They talk to each other all the time. They're constantly, you know, sparring and getting feedback and setting up shots and talking through all these situations. So yes, top players, just because they don't necessarily do a training with me, or they don't necessarily do a training with, you know, they don't necessarily have a coach, but all players that are top players are constantly challenging their own ideas and fighting for ways to make improvements. So, good. And before I wrap up, there's something else I wanted to mention about why I think people get stuck in this trap. And it's something you and I have talked about, but I think it'll be interesting, is a lot of these things work until they don't work. And that's where it gets dangerous. So, like, when you're playing, let's just pick 3 levels of players, just to keep it simple. Let's say that we've got recreational players, like buddies that don't even play pool, but they come over to your house, have a couple beers, and hit balls around. Then you've got, like, you know, or maybe a 4th level of players. Then you got like local league players that play leagues, and they play, you know, good, not great. And then you've got some like tournament players that play really good, you know, winning local tournaments. And then you've got like professional level players. So we'll just break it down to 4 just levels arbitrarily. What works to get to where you can beat one group of guys? It might work to a point, but there might be a point at which it no longer scales higher. So, like, for example, when yours was volume, that was always your big narrative, was like, I'm going to be the guy that puts in more volume than anyone until I can just beat everybody all the time. And right away, like, you could always beat recreational players. And then you got to where you could always beat league players. And then you got to where you could, like, usually beat most, you know, a lot of local players. But then at some point, you had to question that was almost like you were talking about how volume had been like a side quest, and maybe not so much this year, but at different times it was always like your fallback. Like, I know if I just put in volume, I could just put in a bunch of hours, you know, outwork my competition and show up and kind of walk through the tournaments, right?
That's worked for me forever. Like, since I started.
I didn't want to put words in your mouth.
No, dummy. That has worked exactly how it's worked for me. And that's why and we talked about this, and that's why I got stuck on that. And then out here I realized, well, I'm not going to outwork you know, Polish bots. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So like this, it made me realize, like, I got to a certain point, like I matched a guy, he was right around high 600s, almost 700, and I lost. And then I'm like, I saw the mistakes that he made and the holes that he has, and I'm like, you know what? Give me 2 weeks. I'm going to really put in volume and really prepare, and I can get it. And I did, and it worked. And I'm like, ha, look at that, it worked. But then I go out to these tournaments, and I'm playing Sosi in Virginia, and I'm playing this other Eurobot here, and and I'm playing guys that are hulked out, and like even the guy that, like, just everybody, man. It's like, it just doesn't work that way. It's like I have to figure out a different way, and I don't even have that time. Like, I don't have that time. That's the problem. It's like, wife, kids, family, whatever. I don't have unlimited time, and before it used to be, I'll just outwork everybody. Well, everybody's working that hard and way harder and traveling and playing more, and so it's just, it works to a certain point, and it works until it doesn't work. So
that's what I thought that was a good example, is because it's like, you know, this whole thing where it's like, I'm going to outwork people and then beat them all the time. And then if they ever beat me, then I'll just put in a bunch more work until I can beat them all the time. Like that, you could replace work with knowledge. You could replace it with fundamentals. You could replace it with any side quest. Any side quest you go on where you're strengthening up a chain, it'll work for you as long as you're playing people that have broken links in other places in their chain.
Yep.
And then what happens, by the way, is it forms a narrative. And that narrative is, we talked about narratives last time. One narrative is like, I'll play against guys, they're going to beat me in the beginning, and then I'm going to see what doesn't work, I'm going to get better in those areas, and then I'm going to get to where I can beat them all the time.
Yeah.
That's a narrative. Well, the funny part is that when you're a recreational player that just got a pool table along with your friends and they beat you half the time, you can tell yourself that narrative and you can get better and you can beat your friends all the time because they're not very good. And then you can go into a pool league and join the APA and you start as a 3 or 4 and you're playing other 3s, 4s, and 5s, and you can say, I'm going to get better until I can beat these guys all the time. And you know what? You can. You can become an APA 7 or 8 and you can get to where you're beating all those guys all the time. I mean, excluding handicap. And then you could sit there and start entering tournaments. And then maybe you play some local tournament players and you're like, okay, you can beat me now. Now I'm going to get to where I can beat you all the time. And maybe if you put in enough volume and enough effort and enough, learning, maybe you can even get to where you're beating a lot of the local tournament players a lot of the time. But when you go to the U.S. Open 9-ball, there is no way that you're going to just get to the point. Like, if you get out there and you get beat by Shane and you get beat by Filler and you get beat by, Conrad and Ralph Souquet, you're not going to sit there and say, okay, you're beating me now, but I'm going to go into my lab and I'm going to work on my game and I'm going to come back and I'm going to just beat all you guys all the time. It's like, not happening. That does not scale. It does not scale. And so not only does the actual side quest, which is my hammer that I'm going to use as volume, and I'm going to go put in volume until I can beat these guys, that doesn't work because, like you said, these guys you're not going to outwork Clenty Kachi. Like, that's not happening here. So, and you're not going to outwork Fedor Gorst, and you're not going to put in more sets. It's like, you're not going to outwork them. And then secondly, oh, shoot, I lost my train of thought. Secondly, it's not even necessarily the weak link in your game. It's like if you're neglecting other weak links in your game, then strengthening volume isn't shoring up your 10-ball break. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like you could put in volume, and then they go out there and you break dry a few times and they don't, and you're going to beat you 8-2. It's like, well, how did the volume help your 10-ball break? And this was an issue of generating opportunities, or so it's like, I don't know, it doesn't always fix the real issue. So at some point, that strategy, but the reason why people might think that their side quest is so sneaky good is because
it used to work for them.
It got them so far. It got them so first they have a faulty narrative where they believe they can get to the point where they learn, they get beat, lick their wounds, study up, and then beat all their competition, and then level up, rinse, repeat. Well, even that narrative isn't true, because when you get to a certain point, that narrative doesn't scale, because nobody wins all the time, and the competition is too fierce. And so that actually is kind of an amateur mindset, by the way. It's like, for people that have that mindset that you're just going to practice up and win all the time, like, that's not it. But then also, if you got feedback during the soft part of that trajectory, which is learning to be recreational and low-level league players, which is usually the easier part of the journey, you might go on a side quest that got you to where you could beat your friends, and then it got you to where you beat those league players, and then it's hard to let go, because it's like, well, that's always been my secret weapon, is I just go and practice my fundamentals until I can beat the next level of player. It's like, well, that not only does that narrative not scale, but that side quest doesn't scale either, and there's going to be a point at which it starts to break down. And so in the end, I guess you have to be self-aware. Am I getting better? And if you're not, you've got to be curious, and not, you've got to be curious as to what are the real reasons why I'm stuck, and try to get feedback. I mean, you can talk to me. You can email me, info@mnpoolbootcamp.com. You can go on to AZ Billiards. You could post a video of yourself playing and get other people to review it for free on AZ Billiards. You could there's a million things you could do. And you could talk to road partners, go to a tournament with a good player and talk to them about your experiences and your thoughts on what's going wrong. And, of course, the better the player you're talking to, usually I don't want to say the better the info, but I'd say that your hit rate on getting fortunate with good pieces of information gets slightly better as you're dealing with people that have been through more. So anyway, I don't know. So I just wanted to talk about the reason why people might fall in love with their side quests is because it worked for a while.
Yeah, that's an awesome point, Tim. Yep, yeah, I've experienced that, and it smacked me in the face, and it's a hard lesson, but you just learn it and keep moving forward, and fortunate I learned it, and keep trying to learn it, and keep trying to remember it, and yeah, I think it's awesome.
And just to be accountable, on my own, it's like I've kind of gone down side quests. If I've ever been stuck, it's because I was unfortunately too successful into the local level. And so that like you were very successful for a long time with what you did well. And so I was very successful with what I did, which was, mental game management, cue ball and pattern play, and moving and stuff. I just do a very good job with extracting the maximum out of my game and fighting, and really, running out the balls with, good patterns and good cue ball and good game management, good decision making. Those are all my strengths. And so when I'm playing amateur players, even tournament players, they give me opportunities. And then if I run the balls out cleanly and compose myself and don't make unforced errors and move good and keep generating opportunities, I seem like I get there a lot. But when I play, not just Conrad or Ralph, but just anybody that's a real strong player, a professional level player, those things don't win it for me. That's the price of admission. You know what I mean? Running the balls out well doesn't mean, I'm going to run out well and you're going to mess up and then I can just win. It's nope. They're going to do this. They're going to run out just as well as I do. And then it's going to come down to other areas that I might have neglected because, I didn't need a big break when I was winning local tournaments. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I could spot people to break and it didn't matter because they don't run out that many racks from the 10 ball break and so it just doesn't really matter. I could break dry every rack and I played a money match a year ago where I broke dry a lot of the time and barely ran a rack off my break and I still won the match. But it's try that against Tyler Steyer. That ain't gonna work. That dog don't hunt. So
yeah.
So those are. I've been but I try to do the same thing that you're talking about, which is I look in the mirror at what stands between me and my goal, and I understand that my break, my jump shot, my striking, these things are critical, and I know that. And when I said I didn't really learn much this tournament, I guess I shouldn't say I learned that. I think that I was on the right track with those areas of my game, and I'm proud that I've made some improvement and hungry to keep making more. So good.
Yeah, that's it, man. I think it's good.
All right. Well, let's see. We've already kind of told some funny road stories. We know that I'm not gonna go hustling in Poland anytime soon.
Exactly.
I'm gonna go sneak up on those Polish and take my game public in Poland. Yeah. Anything else, Josh? Anything else on your mind?
Well, no. We had a fun time, Dom. There was a lot of challenges, but it was fun. So it's cool. Hopefully, people are listening. They got a little bit of taste of some of the stuff we went through, and some of the stuff that was good and a little bit challenging and fun and funny. And yeah, it's cool.
Sounds good. Well, listen, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and feel free to reach out. Questions, comments, questions that you want us to take on and grapple with, like the elevator doors. We're ready. So, all right, catch you guys next time.